According to legend, a queen crossed a desert larger than many countries. But the strangest part of this story might not be the desert at all. 3,000 miles. No paved roads. No modern maps. No water trucks riding ahead of the caravan. Just camels, gold, frankincense, and a queen who, according to legend, crossed one of the harshest landscapes on Earth to meet a king she had never seen. Let's be clear before we go any further. 3,000 miles is not a confirmed historical measurement. It's the outer edge of what this legend claims, the distance we're going to test. By the end of this video, we'll know whether that number even holds up. And whether the hardest version of the journey, all desert, no ships, was even the only option. This story has been retold for more than 2,000 years. In scripture, in poetry, and in claims of royal blood. But before we ask how she traveled, we need to ask who she actually was. Queen of Sheba isn't a name. It's a title attached to three very different stories. The Hebrew Bible gives us the shortest version. A queen from Sheba hears of Solomon's wisdom. She travels to test him with hard questions. She arrives with camels, spices, gold, and precious stones. She leaves, impressed. No personal name. No physical description. No map of the journey itself. The Quran expands the story. A hoopoe reports a wealthy queen whose people worship the sun. Solomon summons her. She comes. Her throne is brought before him. But the Quran never gives her a personal name in the text either. It names her Makeda. The Kebra Nagast, a much later Ethiopian epic, goes furthest of all.
It names her Makeda.
It gives her a son by Solomon. And it uses that union to legitimize a royal dynasty that claimed descent from them for centuries. 3 traditions, 2 later names, 1 missing historical person. Even her kingdom is argued over. Ethiopia claims her. Yemen claims her. Some scholars treat the Red Sea as a bridge, not a border. A world where southern Arabia and the Horn of Africa were already in contact. The strongest archaeological candidate is still ancient Saba, centered in what is now Yemen. Its capital was Marib. That does not erase the Ethiopian tradition. It makes it a different kind of evidence, later, political, and deeply influential. By the early 1st millennium BCE, the region around Marib was building the irrigation and state power that would make Saba one of Arabia's great kingdoms. At the heart of that system was the Marib Dam, stretching hundreds of meters across the valley. It helped turn seasonal floodwater into farmland. Cities, temples, and political power grew on that water. One caution: if Solomon is placed in the 10th century BCE, the Sabaean state we can see most clearly in monumental inscriptions often looks later. The monumental dam system we can document most securely belongs largely to the 8th and 7th centuries BCE. So even the premise, two rulers at the height of their power, meeting face to face, sits in a disputed window. The premise still isn't absurd. South Arabia was developing the wealth and organization needed for something this audacious. What's missing is a name, attached to a date, attached to a specific journey. What we're testing is whether a journey like the one these traditions describe was even possible. Even if the resources existed, resources don't explain motive. Why would any monarch commit weeks of a kingdom's wealth and manpower to a months-long expedition just to ask a foreign king some difficult questions? The biblical text gives us curiosity. She came to test him with hard questions. That may be true as far as it goes. It is unlikely to be the whole story. Royal visits in the ancient world were rarely just intellectual exercises. They were instruments of statecraft. Consider what each side stood to gain. Saba sat near the southern end of a network carrying incense north. Not because Marib grew all the frankincense itself. The trees grew farther south and east, on dry hillsides toward the harvest lands. Saba's advantage was position, close enough to influence, protect, and profit from parts of that flow. Solomon's kingdom sat near the northern end, with access toward Mediterranean and Egyptian markets. Whoever influenced the passage between those two ends stood to profit from frankincense and myrrh moving north. Picture the source of it all: a gnarled boswellia tree on a dry Arabian hillside. Harvesters cut shallow wounds into the bark, then wait weeks for the sap to harden. Traders weigh the dried tears by hand, sorting grades before they ever reach a caravan. In temples from Jerusalem to Thebes, priests burn that same resin, filling sacred air with smoke. This is why the root mattered as much as the queen herself. Frankincense was one of the ancient world's most valuable commodities. A royal visit would have been the ancient equivalent of a trade summit, securing safe passage through tribal territories along the way, and putting a personal, high-status face on a relationship merchants alone couldn't guarantee. None of this is confirmed by a contemporary treaty. No such document survives. But it explains something curiosity alone does not. Why a monarch, rather than an ambassador, might have made this specific trip. There is a second problem the legend usually skips. A queen leaving southern Arabia did not necessarily have to cross the entire peninsula overland. Maritime movement through the Red Sea was possible in antiquity. A mixed sea and land route may have offered another option. We cannot tie that option to this queen. The all-desert crossing is the hardest version of the story. That's the version this video is stress testing. Because if even that was possible, the softer versions were possible too. Later traditions describe an extraordinarily large caravan. The Kebra Nagas describes 797 camels, along with an enormous number of other pack animals. The number is legendary. The larger point is plausible. A royal caravan would have been an enormous operation. Think of it as a moving city. Camel handlers, responsible for animals that could each carry roughly 90 to 135 kilograms of cargo. Armed escorts, because gold and incense in tribal territory was also a target. Guides who knew which wells still held water in which season. That knowledge was worth more than any weapon. Translators, because the languages along such a route would have shifted more than once. And attendants for the monarch herself. The retinue that made a royal visit look royal, not like a trading expedition in disguise. The cargo went well beyond frankincense. Gold, likely drawn from Arabian or East African trade. Precious stones, spices, rare textiles. A diplomatic gift was built to impress, not merely to sell. Picture the morning of departure. The gates of Marib open before sunrise, while the air is still cool enough to move heavy-laden animals. Camels are checked one last time. Cargo weight, water skins, girth straps. Guides confirm the first well, days ahead, is still holding. A crowd watches the columns stretch beyond Marib's irrigated fields. Then the lead guide signals, and the caravan enters the one part no one fully controlled, the desert. The larger that caravan, the more water it needed, the slower it moved. and the more exposed it was at every gap between wells. A caravan of real scale would have needed advance riders to confirm water and negotiate passage before the main party arrived. A practice attested in later Arabian caravan trade. Forget bandits for a moment. Forget sandstorms. The most critical variable for any ancient caravan was water, the distance between reliable sources. An adult camel can go roughly a week without drinking under moderate conditions. A caravan does not move at the pace of its toughest animal. It moves at the pace of its weakest link. Humans need water far more often in desert heat. So the real map isn't a map of roads. It's a map of wells. Do the math, and the caravan itself becomes part of the problem. A few hundred camels means 100 or more handlers, guides, and escorts. Every one of them needs water too. Even a conservative estimate gives each person several liters of drinking water a day. Across the human retinue alone, a 4 or 5 day gap between wells could demand well over 1,000 liters in reserve before a single camel is watered. That water has weight. Weight is cargo space the caravan doesn't get to spend on gold or incense. The bigger the caravan, the more of itself it has to carry, just to stay alive. The caravan had choices. It did not have one obvious road. One possibility followed the inland network through Western Arabia, linking places such as Najran, Yathrib, Dedan, and Taima. Another stayed closer to the Red Sea, trading landscape for different water. Be honest about the evidence. The caravan cities we know best are often documented later than the age this legend is set in. Pliny, writing in the 1st century CE, described an incense route requiring some 65 days of travel by camel. That is a later commercial system, not a 10th century itinerary. It still shows what Arabia could support once the oasis network was mature. However the column threaded that network, the numbers are worth doing out loud. A heavily loaded camel caravan, resting and watering as it went, could realistically cover around 20 to 25 kilometers a day. A lighter trading caravan, in a later period, could move faster. A royal column, heavy with gifts and people, would not. From Marib toward Jerusalem, a plausible overland route is not a straight line. It could fall somewhere around 1,400 to 1,800 miles one way. At that pace, a one-way crossing could take roughly 3 to 5 months. Which means the 3,000-mile figure this video opened with was never really about a single crossing. It's closer to the round trip. A round trip at that pace could keep a royal caravan on the road for much of a year.
We don't have a document that says, "The Queen took this road."
What we have is archaeological evidence of the broader Arabian incense trade. Wells, way stations, and cities that made long-distance travel possible at all. Along that network, oases tend to appear at intervals. A loaded caravan could cover in a few days' march. Following the known network was not a crossing of unmapped wilderness. It was a chain of settlements that could support travelers, if the chain held. The journey turns genuinely dangerous at the gaps. Stretches where the northern Hejaz thins out toward the southern Levant. Settlements fail, and the terrain gets far less forgiving. This is where an expedition like this could actually die. A miscalculation in water between two distant wells. A tribe that refused passage or demanded more tribute than the caravan carried. A sudden loss of pack animals in extreme heat, leaving people stranded with no way to carry enough water forward. A delay of only a few days at the wrong stretch of road could undo a caravan of this size. Through the Hejaz, water wasn't the only problem. Rugged mountains could force a broad column into narrow tracks, slowing heavy animals over uneven ground. Farther north, the land shifts from arid lowland to the cooler highlands on the approach to Jerusalem. After weeks of desert heat, that cool air would have felt like relief. On one possible approach, one last obstacle still stood in the way. The Jordan Valley, sitting far below sea level. Then a steep climb into the Judean hills. It would have been one of the most demanding elevation changes of the journey, faced only after an already grueling trek north. And what waited at the top mattered as much as the climb. In the Iron Age, Jerusalem sat near routes reaching toward Egypt and the Mediterranean. According to the biblical account, Solomon's court was linked to wealth, alliances with coastal trading cities, and a reputation for gold and luxury goods. The archaeological record on the actual scale of that kingdom remains debated. A king already tied to northern trade may still have been the kind of destination that justified the risk. Picture the caravan reaching Jerusalem's gates, dust-covered, exhausted, impossibly far from home. Guards study the animals, the escorts, the sheer scale of what has arrived. Inside the palace, chests open one by one. Gold, spices, incense, textiles laid before the king. In the story, two rulers from two very different kingdoms finally meet face to face. What happened next between them became legend. Legend is not the same thing as history. Whatever was said inside that palace, the caravan's work was not finished. Every well, every mountain, every water gap still had to be crossed again, this time heading south. What we do have, strong archaeological evidence of the Sabaean civilization itself.
The Marib Dam.
The great temple, later nicknamed Mahram Bilqis, in the inscriptions, a sanctuary of the god Al-Maqqa. Texts confirming a wealthy, organized South Arabian kingdom engaged in long-distance trade. And evidence of South Arabian goods and influence reaching as far north as the Levant. What we do not have, any contemporary Iron Age record, Sabaean, Israelite, or otherwise. Naming a specific queen, describing a specific itinerary, or confirming a caravan of any particular size making this specific trip. The earliest full narrative elaborations, including the Kebra Nagast, come centuries after the events they claim to describe. Does the lack of a confirmed route mean the journey never happened?
No. But a route that could have worked does not prove that she used it.
A mixed sea and land route may have been easier. That doesn't prove she used that either. So could a journey like this have happened? Yes.
The geography, the trade, and the technology made it possible.
Does a royal expedition like this make historical sense? It does. Southern Arabia had the resources for long-distance exchange, and later Saba clearly possessed enormous wealth. But can we prove the Queen of Sheba actually made this journey? No contemporary record gives us her name, her route, or a securely identifiable historical queen behind the later traditions. And perhaps that's why the story endures. The legend remains unproven, but the world capable of producing it was very real. But if a journey from Sheba was possible, another question remains. Where did the wealth in her story, and Solomon's famous gold, actually come from? That's exactly where we're headed next on Ancient Horizons, as we go looking for the lost land of Ophir.